Hi, everybody. So we are here. This is very exciting for our next Star Trek podcast that we've been doing. My friend Tom is here. Do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm a Star Trek fan.
Yes. And I am what do you say, emerging Star Trek fan.
Nice.
So it's very exciting. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Let me turn that off. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So today we are going to be looking, we've already reviewed all 6 of the original films, and now we are going to be looking at the 2009 film that was directed by JJ Abrams. And the reason why we decided to do it this way was because we have the new Star Trek Beyond coming out next week, and we wanted to review this weekend. And we wanted to review this and Into Darkness so we'd be ready for Star Trek Beyond this weekend. So that's why we're kind of doing a strange order, but it works.
Well, we're keeping the original character movies together, so
yeah, works. That's right. That's right. So this is a reboot that happened in 2009, and it's, I would say, would you say it's somewhat controversial amongst fans?
Yeah, just somewhat, but yeah, it is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think most fans would call it a bad movie. I think many fans would question whether it should exist. It's kind of an odd thing, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. We'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I have my summary, and as I told Tom off the air that I struggled with this summary to make it. I don't know. There's just so much going on, and it jumps a lot all around. And so I'm sorry if it's not perfect, but anyway, here we go. Okay, so Star Trek 2009 starts with James Kirk's birth aboard a ship called the USS Kelvin. His mother is being forced to evacuate because of an attack by a Romulan ship called the Narada. His father ends up sacrificing himself with the ship for the good of his family. Then it zooms ahead to Kirk as a rebellious young man who is encouraged to enter the Starfleet. It is there he meets Uhura, McCoy, and Spock. Spock and Kirk don't get along because Spock accuses him of cheating. Kirk and the rest of the crew board the Enterprise ran by Captain Pike when a similar attack is made from the one that happened in Jim's birth. Kirk and Sulu find the Romulan ship is a drilling platform. They try to stop it, but the drill forms a black hole that destroys the planet Vulcan. Spock saves his father, but loses his mother. Kirk and Spock disagree on what should be done to stop the Romulans, and Spock maroons Kirk on Delta Vega. There he meets an older Spock, who explains that Nero, the Romulan leader, is angry at him for 129 years in the future. Spock's attempt to use red matter to create artificial black hole and consume the supernova failed, and Nero's family perished along with the Romulans. Kirk is able to provoke Spock, which makes him emotionally compromised, and Kirk becomes the captain. They hide the Enterprise, and Kirk and Spock beam aboard the Narada and fight Nero. They are able to destroy the drill and create red matter using a collision between older Spock's ship and the Narada. Kirk offers to help Nero and his ship escape, but he refuses. The Enterprise is almost sucked down the black hole, but they are able to escape its clutches. The movie ends with Kirk getting promoted and young Spock meeting old Spock, who encourages him to keep working with Starfleet.
Not bad. Not bad. There was only one confusing point.
Okay.
When you said that Kirk provokes Spock and emotionally compromises him, you need to have clarified which Spock he was provoking.
Right.
Yeah.
Young Spock.
Right.
You're right. That's good. That's a good clarification. Oh, well, good. I'm glad that I at least got it for the most part right. It was challenging. It was very challenging. So, what was your overall experience with this with this rewatch for you? This is the only one that I have seen before out of all these ones we will watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one that I will have previously seen. But for you, what was it like on this rewatch?
Well, I actually had watched it relatively recently, and so much so that I hadn't even put the DVD away. It was still sitting out on the counter.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun, as always. This time I was, thinking ahead for our talk. I got a lot. I was trying to pay attention to ties to the original series and things like that. And so I appreciated my depth of appreciation was a little greater this time around because I was more consciously looking for that stuff. So yeah, it was a good time.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm helping you appreciate it even more. I love it.
Yeah.
What's interesting for me is that the first time I saw it, I liked it, but I didn't, I don't know. It was just kind of an action movie. Like, I think I kind of looked at it sort of like the Fast and Furious movies,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I guess, kind of ironic. The next one's being directed by one of those directors, but just kind of an action movie. But this time watching it, I appreciated it more, and I could also see why some of the fans didn't like it.
Right.
Like, I got it a little bit more now. And it was interesting. My friend Rob's sister Nino happened to be talking about this series on Twitter, and he said that he's like, it's not that they're not entertaining. And this is his words. He said it's just that they're made for people who hate Star Trek. Which I thought was an interesting statement. He's a diehard Star Trek fan. And I don't know if I go that far, but I think they are made for people who don't know anything about Star Trek. Or aren't fans.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I would go so far as to say they're made for people who hate Star Trek, but I kind of see his point. Here's the problem with that as a criticism. Okay, because here's the problem with that. The only other option is a fan film. It's this or it's a fan film because it has to appeal. I mean, when $1 billion openings are practically considered failures these days,
right?
I mean, the pressure on these filmmakers to get butts in those seats is tremendous. I mean, these movies have to gross many times over what, say, Star Trek II grossed, even accounting for inflation, and every time they can't miss or there won't be another one.
And I guess for me, the thing that my defense or counter argument would be Star Trek has been a lot of things. I mean, just in these 6 movies, I mean, Star Trek 4 was practically a farce. Like, it was a very silly movie. And so it's not like, and then you have the exact complete opposite in the motion picture in the first one. Where it's practically 2001 Space Odyssey, and so, like, I feel like there's room within Star Trek, and just from my limited knowledge of the movies, to have an action-adventure kind of style. Because they've tried a lot of different styles.
Exactly. I agree with you completely. And I think Trek needs to change. It needs to I think we need to retain what makes it work and what's kept it alive all these years. But I don't think these new, speaking particularly about this new one, I don't think it throws any of that out or rejects it per se. It would be, when he says it's for people who hate Star Trek, that in isolation, if no one knew anything about what he was talking about, he's making it sound like it's poking fun at Star Trek.
Mm.
If you'll allow a little bit of a tangent. I know there's a lot of nostalgia around the Batman TV show.
Right.
The older I got, though, and I realized that I was being made fun of by that show, the less I liked it, and the more I realized, this is made by people who really think comic books are stupid.
You're talking about 1960s.
Yeah, the 1960s TV series.
Right.
Yeah, that hurt. It stings every time I see it. Like, even though it's legitimately funny, like some of the stuff that they do is legitimately funny, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
It's done in such a spirit that it's looking down its nose at Batman.
Hmm.
And I can see that, and it makes my skin crawl. Now, maybe some fans detect that here, and if they do, it's, who am I to say no, that's not really there, if that's what they get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's there. In fact, I think I see a lot of affection for the original series, and for what makes Star Trek good. And I think there's an eagerness here to bring in a wider audience and create new Star Trek fans. I think if Star Trek becomes this dusty old thing, that appeals to a small cult following, eventually it'll go away, and we won't be celebrating Star Trek's 100th birthday in 50 years.
And poor JJ Abrams, he can't win. Like, he does Force Awakens, and everybody's like, "You're just copying it. You're doing the same thing that they already did." And he does this, and they're like, "It's too different. It's too
right." Yeah,
I'm okay with both. I think both, if executed well, I don't have a problem with.
Well, yeah, and I think the point is to tell a good story and make sure Star Trek is still in there. And I think this, we're skipping ahead a little bit. I think this manages that task fairly well.
Right. Well, let's kind of go there. So, do you see similarities to the series? I've heard that there is an episode where Kirk not meets his father, but has some kind of... There's an episode involving Kirk's father.
Not really.
Okay, maybe I was wrong then. But
I think he's mentioned in the series.
Okay, that's it.
But I think that's possible. I couldn't say chapter and verse on that, but I believe George Kirk is mentioned, but maybe only just in passing, like as in James T. Kirk, son of George.
Did we mention that they just announced that there's going to be a fourth movie, and George Kirk is going to be in it somehow, some way?
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
They're going to use that whole whale time travel thing from the fourth one. Yeah.
Well, maybe it could be that. What I want to see is when I heard about that, the first thing I thought of, I want to see him staggering with a full beard out of a Klingon prison. A shell of a man, because what got cut from this movie is the Narada, the Romulan ship, being surrounded by Klingons as it sort of lists in space, and so Nero and his crew are captured by the Klingons, which means that if somehow George survived the collision, he probably would have ended up in the custody of the Klingons. And there's those events are sort of alluded to in the scene where Uhura is changing her clothes and she's talking to her roommate about her day. She talks about how a Klingon fleet was destroyed at a Klingon prison planet, and that 47 ships were destroyed, like a huge number of ships, a whole armada of Klingon ships were destroyed. And that's what she's talking about. And so I can't help but wonder if maybe that's where they're going with it. I kind of doubt they're going to do time travel. Honestly, I think they've kind of spent that card.
Oh, okay. Huh. Interesting.
So, but I could be wrong. I don't know anything about it. So
sure. Anyway, so yeah, are there sort of episodes of the show that feel more sort of action-y kind of feel, that have this sort of feel to it at all, or that you can kind of think of?
Well, sure. I mean, one thing you have to sort of adjust for 1966, 1967.
Mm-hmm.
Adjusting for that, it was a fairly action-packed show. Fist fights were not uncommon. Kirk's shirt getting ripped was not uncommon. And in fact, if there's a classic episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, that has a bar fight scene that is interminable. It goes on and on and on. So that it's mostly the action mostly comes in the form of fisticuffs because they don't have much else to work with. back then. It was mostly stunts and that kind of thing. I like to think that where this handles Star Trek well is that I think that if the folks making original Star Trek had had the tools that JJ Abrams had at his disposal, they would have packed it with just as much fun and action and excitement as JJ did.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. So let's talk about. One other thing. We're going to talk about this in the future, but a little bit more. But does Uhura and Spock have a relationship at all in the original series?
No, that raised a lot of eyebrows among the fans.
Okay.
That's not a thing at all in the series.
Okay. All right. So what did we think about casting? Let's talk about that first. You've got Chris Pine. You've got Zachary Quinto. What do you think is maybe the strongest casting? What is maybe one of the weaker casting? Or just what do you think of them in general?
I think Carl Urban as Bones is the strongest because he doesn't do an impersonation, and yet he manages to pull off, I think in a believable way, this character who has become, it'd be so easy to just fall into the cartoon of who McCoy is, and he doesn't. I think he brings him off in a human and likable way that's just a lot of fun to watch. The biggest, the weakest, maybe not so strong, I don't know.
I have one if you don't.
Go ahead.
Zachary Quinto. I don't think he's very good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maybe he grows into it a little bit, but I thought he was really flat in the role.
Yeah, interesting.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I don't think that it did him any favors because, in my opinion, they make Spock feel way too much in this first movie. Like, it takes him like 4 or 5 movies to feel the same amount that he feels in this first movie in the original films. And I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't Spock. I mean, I'm no expert, but I just felt like he was flat. Very wooden and flat.
Huh. But you thought he was too emotional, but he was flat?
Yeah, like he was flat in being emotional.
Okay.
Like he didn't sell those scenes to me, and yeah, it's kind of like, yeah. I don't know.
Maybe you can say maybe he just doesn't have the chops for this role or whatever, one thing I will say about his characterization of Spock is that, the Spock that we saw was a fully mature and integrated Spock. Like, he was a very different kind of man.
But wouldn't he feel less at that point? Like, I mean, I feel like he had to learn to feel things. Whereas this, he's young and feeling more.
Yeah, no, it's just the opposite. Actually, in the series, Spock feels very buttoned down. Spock is very sober and very unemotional and very insistent that he is a Vulcan, not a human. That he's very much he's kind of on the other end of the pendulum. Where he's more Vulcan than Vulcan. He's Vulcan in a defensive kind of way. You follow what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Now, one thing about it is that in the early, one thing I want to mention here is the cage, which was Star Trek was one of those weird shows that got 2 pilots. NBC ordered a pilot from Gene Roddenberry. He made one, and they said, "Interesting, do another one, but cut the budget." And so they did. And in that first pilot, it had a rather different cast. The only cast member who carried over was Leonard Nimoy as Spock. And Captain Pike, the character of Captain Pike, comes from that original pilot. Captain Pike was in charge of the Enterprise. And and Spock was his first officer. And in that, we see Spock smile. We see Spock shout. He has emotional outbursts. He still has the pointy ears. He still looks like himself.
Right.
But he's somewhat emotional. Now, one way that fans have kind of retconned that is that, well, Spock was still figuring things out. And that by the time we get to the second pilot, he's pretty much worked it out.
So do they consider that? They consider that first pilot canon then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mainly because it doesn't dramatically contradict what comes after it too much. And it's cool. Completely feasible that the crew would change. Like that's not a ridiculous idea.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe I'm being too hard on him, but I don't know. He didn't do it for me. But,
that's fine.
Yeah. But I like Chris Pine. I think that he's good. He's probably my favorite. Although I do like Karl Urban, as you said, and I also don't mind. What's his name? I mean, I guess I don't think Eric Bana is very good as Nero. In this, but I don't know if it's really his fault.
Yeah, he's fine. He does it. He does his job.
He's just kind of. But I think that Simon Pegg is fine as Scotty. I think that Zoe Saldana is fine as Uhura. The rest of the casting I think was solid. But I think Chris Pine really has that like charisma that you need to play Kirk.
Yeah, he does. And I like Karl Urban. I think it would have been so easy to just do an impersonation, and he doesn't. He really makes it his own. That's
true. That's a good point. And maybe it was hard for Quinto in a way because he's the only one that had to play alongside Nimoy. His counter. Maybe that made it feel a little bit more flat for me. That you have the real thing kind of right there. I don't know.
And my understanding is that the surviving members of the original cast spent some time on the set and spent some time with the actors, and definitely made it some effort to pass the torch.
Yeah. Well, and we should mention Anton Yelchin, rest in peace. Yeah. That's very tragic what happened with him.
Yeah, he was he was a delight. When I first saw this movie, I was really taken with his Chekhov. Yeah. His accent is at once both more authentic and yet somehow more Chekhov. He's chirpy. He's funny. And this is something I love about the way the characters were written and played. Everybody's good at what they do. If you'll notice, there's sort of kind of a pattern in the original movies. Stuff keeps breaking. And people keep being bumbling idiots at their jobs. I mean, even in Star Trek VI, one of the good ones, the best one in my opinion, really, Uhura has to have, a Rajay's Klingon thesaurus out, and
it's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, and these are right out of college too, or the Starfleet.
Right, and the thing is, I get that it was in service to a joke, which was a pretty funny bit, I guess, but in those movies, they're kind of cartoonized a little bit. And in this, I love that, no, they're all competent. They all belong there.
That's a good point. That is very true. Okay. They're really, I mean, I guess Peg Scotty is the most comic relief of the group. Probably more so than the original.
I think what Simon Pegg did with that, he's a very different kind of Scotty. I think what Simon Pegg did with that is he tried to think okay, if Scotty's kind of a young whippersnapper, what would he be like? He's this brilliant guy. Well, he's this genius who has a lot to prove. The Scotty we know from the original movies and the series is pretty confident. He's the ruler of his roost. He knows his ship extremely well. He has nothing to prove to anybody. He's a miracle worker, and he knows it.
He can even do the Morse code, right?
Exactly, yeah. But in this, I love those moments where Scotty's like, "Hey, that was pretty good what I just did."
Yeah. That's true. That's a good
fun to
point.
see that
And
stuff.
how lucky, like Simon Pegg's like the luckiest nerd ever.
Yeah.
He gets to be in Star Wars. He gets to be in Star Trek. He gets to be in Mission Impossible. He gets to.
Oh, I got it. I've been wondering if lately if there's some nerd who found a genie, and that's why all our wishes are being granted these days. It's him. He's the one.
Yeah,
We found him.
that's right. All right. So, I guess it's kind of similar. What is one change you like that they made, and one that you would wish they hadn't done in this reboot?
Let's see. A change that I like is the Enterprise. I like seeing the new ship, and she feels familiar, and yet it's clearly new. And I'm talking about now about the exterior, really, and yeah, most of the set that they constructed. I love the look, but I guess on the inside, I love the look of the control panels and all that stuff. My phone, I've got an overlay on my phone so that it looks and sounds like it belongs on that ship. Those same kinds of sounds and stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But one I didn't like was the engine room set. I look at that and I go, it's a damn brewery. They're not going to warp in that room. They're making beer. I don't buy it.
That's very true.
I get what they were trying to do, but it's too big. The tanks are too big and too many. It takes me out of it, and I have a hard time with that part.
It does have a bit of like a Titanic feel to it.
Yeah. It's bigger on the inside. There's too much in there. Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah, I guess for me, I would say I like the action. I think that's fun, and I dislike the romance, and so yeah, I didn't think that worked at all. So that's what I would change. Okay, so do you think it works giving Kirk a backstory involving his father? Does that work for you?
It does, and it sort of shows, it allows them to sort of clean the slate with these characters a little, because Kirk Prime, his father did not die. He was not motivated by his father's death to join Starfleet. He was like Chekhov at 17, getting out of the academy like a whiz kid and just being really smart and motivated and just climbing up those ranks, And I like that he's a little bit remedial. He's a little bit on his butt at first, and then he has to kind of scrap his way out of it, and that's how his character is revealed. It makes for a more interesting movie for sure.
I mean, I guess I would like it a little bit more if we didn't see that sort of story arc so often with sort of the orphan, rebellious teen, everything from Aladdin to Iron Man to Batman to, it's a little overdone, but it's fine. I don't mind it. And it's certainly a weird, feeling in a way for Star Trek to have like a birth and to have a family feel to it. I guess you had Kirk and his son as a story, but I don't know. This has just felt different.
Yeah, one thing that occurred to me is that they kind of turned the father-son thing on its head in this and made it not about Kirk and his son, but Kirk and his father.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Do you think it gets a little confusing with the action and what's going on at all?
Yeah, it has some problems there. They even released like a supplemental comic to fill in backstory, which I read. There's actually a series of comics that sort of show what Spock is doing, the Spock we know, Leonard Nimoy Spock, is doing in the past, and all that set up with Nero and everything, and it ties in next gen characters, and because it's during the next gen period, it's that just that far in the future, and
like when they put on those body suits and are going towards the drill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first. I had no idea what was going on. Like I had no idea where are they going? What are they trying to do? Who's on this ship? Like it was confusing, and I still was a little confused this time through. If I didn't kind of have my Wikipedia out and sort of an idea of kind of what was going on, I think I would be pretty confused.
Yeah, it does move very quickly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just like you've got these different time frames, and you've got old Spock, and you've got it's just a lot going on. You've got stuff with his father and Nero, and it's yeah. So okay, so my next question is going along with what I already talked about. Do they make Spock too emotional? And like I already said, I felt like he was supposed to be young, so I was expecting him to be even more logical. And here he's like kissing people. He's telling, like where in Wrath of Khan, he says, like this is the logical thing for me to do, to sacrifice for my friends. Mm-hmm. Where I feel like here he's like, tell Uhura that I miss her, or that I love her, or whatever. And I don't know, it just felt like this is not Spock. Like this is somebody who's too emotional for me.
Well,
I don't know. What do you think?
What we have here is a Spock who's pretty much the same guy, but who made slightly different choices.
Okay.
And who took his father's advice and went in a different direction with it. So early on, you have that scene with Spock as a kid. He gets in a fight at school, and he's talking with his dad about stuff, right? Well, he asks him, you want me to be fully Vulcan, that you married a human. Where's the logic in that? And he says, well, no, you see, I was the ambassador to Earth, and so it just made sense for me to, I got a human with the humans, so I married a human, right?
Right.
And I don't think Spock buys that. I think Spock maybe, it's possible Spock admires his dad a little more, or maybe sees how his mother's influence improved his dad, or made his dad a more complete person. And so maybe values his human half slightly more. One thing I did like is that Zachary Quinto, and the writers brought forth Spock's kind of snarky smartass aspect of his personality.
That's true.
He can kind of be, his wit can be kind of biting at times, and they brought that out and maybe sharpened it just a little bit. But I don't have a problem with him in Uhura as much as I think other people do, just because I think he's trying something out. I think he's seeing where this goes,
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it make more sense though? Like, wouldn't it be more satisfying as far as the emotional compromise if he already hadn't been kind of emotionally compromised a little bit? Like that moment would be really impactful, seems to me.
Well, which moment are you referring to?
That when he breaks down, is like, my planet is destroyed, and he says, I'm emotionally compromised, I can't lead the ship anymore.
Uh-huh. If
he hadn't already been kind of emotional, like that would have been like, wow, that was a big moment.
Right. Well, something you need to understand about Vulcans is that they do feel, even ones that aren't half human, they do feel, and they feel passionately. But the problem is that deep in their past, they were so passionate that they almost destroyed themselves many times over.
Okay.
And a sort of Confucius Christ figure named Sirach emerged and came up with this philosophy of logic and self-discipline and control, right? So the Vulcans have kind of this overlay of logic and keeping their emotions at bay, at arm's reach, or at arm's length, so that they're never just completely overcome with them. So Spock maybe, I think, is calibrated to a little bit less control just because he's human, or part human. So, I mean, it's fine if you had a problem with it. I'm not going to talk you out of it. If you don't think it works, that's fine. But I'm not uncomfortable with it. So
it's an interesting perspective. I hadn't really thought of it that way. So okay. I mean, it's not like he's like Anakin or in the Attack of the Clones. Or he's not that bad, but just it was the weakest part to me. Okay.
One thing about that aspect too of Kirk provoking Spock, that happens like twice in the series, where Kirk has to provoke Spock to anger and get him to fight him.
Emotionally compromised.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And there are different circumstances where Spock is gone bye-bye, and in order to get him back, Kirk has to provoke him to beat him up.
So is that a thing in this series, that if you're emotionally compromised, you can't be the captain?
I think emotionally compromised, not in those words exactly, but there are instances where the captain is not fit to command because of emotional reasons. Yeah, that happens. We don't see Kirk do that, but we do see another. Actually, Captain Decker, Matt Decker's dad, in the Doomsday Machine, is emotionally compromised and has to be relieved of command because he's just lost his whole crew and killed a whole planet full of people, and he's off his nut. So they have to relieve him. And the chief medical officer can, but that's something for the chief medical officer to determine generally. Spock is weirded that way in that he's Mr. Rulebook, and so he wouldn't wait for the chief medical officer. If he saw that logically that he was not fit, he would relieve himself. But this younger Spock is he's so stubborn, right? He's got that stubbornness in Spock that we love, and as a result, he doesn't see it in himself until he's pushed, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's true. He is a very still very black and white, I think, about things, as far as like, well, you cheated, or you kind of a thing. Like, he has no problem calling Kirk out for that. Yeah.
What we have here is these guys really butting heads, but the idea is that this is like Lennon meeting McCartney. Like, these are two geniuses who really belong together, but they don't know it yet.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Even he says that, old Spock, at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so what did you think of the villain and the idea? So I thought the idea of his wife being destroyed by the planet kind of reminded me of Wrath of Khan, and the black hole kind of reminded me of the motion picture, the first one with V'ger.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like there was some sort of callbacks there a little bit.
Well, sure. I mean, some of it is these are Star Trek tropes, right? The scary, swirly thing in space that's going to eat us all, and then also, the idea. Well, and that's primal stuff. I lost my family, and it's your fault. That's primal. Everybody can identify with that, right? So.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think of Nero? And we already talked about him a little bit, but do you have any other thoughts about him?
They did some interesting stuff with it that I felt like they didn't have time to get into in the movie. I don't like the Narada as generally. I think it's too stylized to be a believable mining ship, and it's a little too Death Star, in its fearsomeness.
Especially this recent one.
Yeah.
Obviously, they wouldn't have known that, but they looked very similar to the one in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, the super weapon stuff turns me off. I would have liked to have seen something a little more Trek and a little less Lovecraft in that spaceship. And I like the bald heads and the tattoos, though. In the comic book, it talks about how those are like signs of mourning in Romulan culture, which, and not having seen a lot of Romulan culture, it's cool that there's a layer of depth that's been added to it. Mm-hmm. And I do appreciate that much.
So he's mad about something that old Spock did, right? Mm-hmm. With his that caused the death of his wife.
Yeah, so something you need to understand about something you need to understand about Spock is that during the Next Generation period and after, Spock is on a mission to reunify Romulus and Vulcan. And Romulus and Vulcan are known to be breakoffs of each other. But like at some point, some spacefaring Vulcans said, "Screw this logic stuff. We're getting out of here."
I
And
didn't know that.
they ended up on Romulus. So yeah, Romulans are Vulcans without the logic. They're what Vulcans would be if they didn't have their logic and their philosophy and their mysticism. So they're kind of the dark side of Spock in a way.
Okay.
And
So does he go? He goes back in time and kills Kirk's father,
yeah,
right? Or
yeah.
And then he goes. Yeah, so he's all
And
over
then
the place.
he's trapped on the prison planet for the Klingon prison planet for 25 years. They manage to escape, and that's when Kirk and crew run across his path.
Okay. All right. So, kind of already talked about the action a lot. Let's see. I really liked the pacing, even though it is pretty frenetic. But I just thought it had sort of a positive energy to it.
Oh yeah.
I kind of hate it when people say the movie is fun, because I feel like that's sort of like an equivalent of saying she's nice. It doesn't mean a whole lot. But it was kind of fun. It was energetic. It was positive. You know.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It has a spring in its step.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last time, that I love that we went from Star Trek 6 to this because, that last line, second star to the right and straight on till morning.
Yeah.
That's fantastic here, because here they are, they're kids again. And
True.
and I love the way that the Enterprise itself goes to warp. It's like it's shot out of a cannon. You know, none of this slow warm up and then speeding off like a car. No, it's just gone. And I think it's sort of emblematic of the whole pace of it, of the whole movie, is before you even have time to think about it, it's on its way.
Yeah, it's definitely very frenetic. I mean, it is hard to believe that this and the motion picture are in the same franchise.
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, okay. So, so they bring back Leonard Nimoy as old Spock. Is this a gimmick, or did you like it? Did it work for you?
I liked it. They needed to pass the torch, and they found a way to do that. So they brought in the original fans that way and made sure that they were absolutely on board with this, or tried to anyway. I think they made as good an effort as they could. And oh yeah, Spock is so good in this. I can still hear his voice in my head. Yeah, he makes a great kind of mentor figure here, and I love his interactions with the younger Kirk and his surprise at seeing him, and sort of knowing the beginning, knowing the end at the beginning. Having someone there who knows that is kind of fun, because he's in our shoes. We know that Kirk and Spock are destined to be the best of friends and a great partnership. And he does, and so does Spock. So we have someone who's in our shoes.
Well, and evidently young Spock and old Spock can meet without disrupting the space-time continuum.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah, no, I liked it. I thought it worked. I thought it kind of, he's sort of the Obi-Wan of this film, kind of. Okay, so what did you think of the special effects and the production design? We talked a little bit about the ship.
Yeah.
But I tell you, one special effect that I don't think worked, I didn't really like, is that space monster. That to me felt like Star Wars to me, not Star Trek.
The big red beast that chases Kirk, yeah.
I thought that I wasn't a huge fan of that.
Yeah, that was a little strange. And it is a very Star Wars kind of thing. On the other hand, monsters aren't completely alien. That's not a completely foreign idea in Star Trek either. So, it's not usually a straight ahead, like, oh, I've got to slay the dragon kind of thing. It's usually, oh well, we don't understand this thing. It's not it's not something we have to kill. It's just something we have to outsmart or talk to, or yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. And But aside from that, I thought all the special effects looked really good. I thought everything felt good. Okay, so I only have 2 more questions. So what do you think of the music by Michael Giacchino? He's a Pixar favorite, Michael Giacchino. What do you think of the music?
It's a little heavy-handed in places. It's a little, it's a little bombastic. I do like the theme. I think it soars in just the right kind of way, and yeah, I eat up that theme. I think it owes a lot to the motion picture theme, but it's got the same kind of soaring quality, but it also is faster paced and a little more. It sort of reflects the fun tone of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. It could be a little bit on the nose at times, but I did like that theme as well.
I do love the way. One other thing I want to say about the music, I also love the way he brought in East Asian kind of instruments and a feeling into the Vulcan scenes.
I didn't notice that.
Just that melts my heart. I love that stuff. I think it adds a layer of beauty to the Vulcan culture that's already great.
Right.
So.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed that. That's very true. Okay, my last question is just: do you think it's a little bit too PG-13ish for Star Trek? You've got sensuality, you've got fighting, you've got so a little bit of language. Do you think it should be more kid friendly? Should this be something that kids should be able to see and participate in? And
yeah, it bugs me, some of those elements that were brought in. I mean, it's not like Kirk never kissed a girl in the original series, but they were never in their underwear and they were never writhing around on a bed. So
I mean, Star Trek V is the only one that's really distasteful in that regard.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it bugs me that my son who's 4, that I have to skip certain scenes. Because he loves it. These movies are helping to turn him into a fan, and I think that's what the function of these movies should be, is to raise a new generation of fans. And yeah, I wish they backed off on some of that crap a little bit. And I think some of that is just trying to sell it to the widest audience possible, but in such a way that we're cool at the same time. I don't know.
I agree. Okay, that was it. That's all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you want to talk about?
Well, just that, there was so much I wanted to say about like how this ties back into the original series. There's so many great things that they brought back. The sound effects were very like, you could almost swear that they had been on the original series. They weren't. But it's like they've been retooled in such a way that they seem so familiar, and they just sing. I love the sound of the transporters, and I love the kind of sonar ping that you hear throughout on the ship. I love the uniforms. I love that we're back to the primary color uniforms, which in the 80s were considered kind of hokey because in the 60s they were in. Those primary color uniforms were on the show because everything else on the ship was gray, and this was a color television show. They, as much as possible, and color TV was new. They wanted to make color a big deal. But I love that it's back. I love that the color is back and it's here to stay. Apparently,
that's true. I hadn't thought of that. Good point. You have any other stuff about the tie-ins?
Let's see. I felt like a lot of the action felt like the original series to me. The fist fights, like I said, there's a bar fight to beat the band in the original series. There's a handful of them too.
Okay.
I love that.
Aside from 5, have there been any in the movies? Any fist fights? I'm trying to think if they fist fight in 2 or 3.
They kind of have to fight their way out of the hospital in 4, sort of, but it's more like they just push people over.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool. That's good to know. I wondered about that.
mhm.
I was like, is this? In fact, I was watching an interview about this latest one where I guess Chris Pine actually got a black eye, a legit black eye on the set
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
because of the action.
Yeah, and it's this younger crew. I mean, yeah, I think some of the fans need to lighten up and I also think they need to watch their original series again, because I think they're not getting that there's tons of stuff that's been drawn out of the original series. It's just that no other movie has done it in just this way before. So it is true to the original series in its own way, not in the way the original movies were, but it's different.
Yeah.
It's new.
Well, and like I said, just with the movies, there's been a lot of different takes on it already in those six movies, and I'm sure that's also true in the Next Generation. And there's so many different shows that there's just got to be a pretty wide slope, I would think, or umbrella of things. I mean, like I said, how can you have more different than 4 and 1 of this series as far as these movies? I mean, totally different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess I don't feel like, I don't know, I don't feel like it has to always be like 2, like Wrath of Khan.
Right. Well, and the arguments about, JJ Abrams isn't a fan, he doesn't like Star Trek. Well, I guess you don't realize that Nick Meyer, who directed Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 6, 2 of the best movies, had never watched the show until he was on the job. Mm-hmm. And he had to watch old 16 millimeter films of the series in order to catch up. I think it's okay for people who aren't fans to be involved with making it. The self-appointed gatekeeping is obnoxious. And you know what? You can like it or not, and fine. But who are you to say, you're not allowed to make this movie, a Star Trek movie, because I'm in charge of it and you're not, and I was here first. That's silly. Yeah.
Right. I agree. I mean, I put it, it's one of the stronger, I would say, I don't know if you count, this is a reboot, but there's been a lot of horrible remakes, and I did think a little bit of Point Break while I was watching this. I don't know, I had a little bit of that feel, and there was a horrible Point Break remake last year. So it could have been a lot worse. That's for sure. I mean, they should be grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. And they got fans involved in writing it. People who know the series, So that's obvious. I mean, there is fan service deep in the DNA of this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we could talk with a magnifying glass on every little thing.
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think this was fun. What grade, I guess, if you had to give it a grade, what would you give this film?
A. It's fun, it's solid Trek, and it works. Yep, it's an A. It's as good as a Star Trek movie can get, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
I would give it a B+. I really like it, but I think that that the villain is a little weak. But I like it. A B+ is a pretty good grade for me, so that's what I would give it. But yeah, it'll be fun to talk about the next one because I'm a huge Benedict Cumberbatch fan, and I know the next one is really controversial.
Oh yeah.
So we'll have fun talking about that on Wednesday, and then sometime next week we will talk about Star Trek Beyond.
Nice.
And I look forward to that. And so, yeah, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Elmano Roboto, or on my website tgunwriter.com.
Cool. And I'll have that all in the description section. And thanks so much again for doing
Rachel.
this with me. And we will talk again on Wednesday.
Yeah. See you then.